Greetings and welcome to the Dynamics of Colorism with your host, Dr. Donnamaria Culbreth. You may call in to share your experiences, colorism, to pose a question, or just to give a general comment. You may do so by dialing area code 914-338-1308. And now, to begin our show, here's Dr. Culbreth. Greetings and welcome to the Dynamics of Colorism for Thursday, February 7th, 2013. I'm your host, Dr. Donnamaria Culbreth, and I'm coming to you live from Windsor Mill, Maryland, where the Dynamics of Colorism will be coming to you every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our topic tonight is skin bleaching and the bleaching syndrome, and our guest is Dr. Ronald E. Hall. And I'd like to give you a good introduce Dr. Hall by giving you his bio and talking about his work and publications. Currently, Dr. Hall is a professor of social work and an affiliate of African American and African Studies at Michigan State University. He is a leading expert in the field, and his research focuses on racism and skin color issues. He has also served as an expert witness in legal cases involving skin color issues, and he lectures internationally. Dr. Hall is also the founder of the Color Clinic, which is a source to help everyone learn about skin color issues. And with the Color Clinic, he also has a Color Clinic library, which contains a great deal of information and resources for researchers, students, faculties, and professionals who actually wish to enhance their professional knowledge about skin color issues. And Dr. Hall's publications include the recently released revised edition of The Color Complex, The Politics of Skin Color, The New Millennium, and also his book, The Millennium, Skin Colors, 21st Century International Discourse. Both of those books are available on Amazon.com, and if you go to Dr. Hall's website, The Color Clinic, you will also be able to see his other publications. His selected journal articles that I selected regarding the bleaching syndrome are The Bleaching Syndrome Among People of Color, Implications of Skin Color for Human Behavior in the Social Environment. The next one is The Bleaching Syndrome, Manifestations of a Post-Colonial Pathology Among African American Women. And the last article is The Bleaching Syndrome, the Context of Somatic Norm Image Among Women of Color. It's a qualitative analysis of skin color. Good evening, Dr. Hall. How are you?
Fine.
I must tell you, the book, The Color Complex.
Yes.
Outstanding. I read it, I was telling Dr. Hall, in 3 days.
Well, I should give credit also to my co-authors, Kathy Russell and Dr. Midge Wilson at DePaul University in Chicago.
Right, the book is excellent. Wonderful book. And your second book, The Melanin Millennium, excellent as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love your research. Well, I wanted to begin by asking you, what prompted your interest in skin color research?
Well, actually, I grew up a child of the 60s, and I remember coming home on a daily basis and watching the evening news. And in many instances, I would see civil rights marches. I would see civil unrest being portrayed by the news media. And that was of great concern to me as a young man. I wasn't quite mature enough to really understand what was going on. But I do remember Martin Luther King being assassinated. And at some point, I realized that I thought that racism in this country was such an insidious issue that I didn't think it was much that I could say to sway European Americans. But I thought, being an African American, there may be something I could say, maybe some aspect of the issue that I could convey to African Americans and perhaps help us heal and move beyond the issue. And in reading some of the literature, I became aware of the fact that a lot of the behaviors that we attribute to white racism were similar to some of the discriminatory behaviors that I had observed in the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
And that puzzled me, and it sparked a great interest. And it's about the point where I turned 18 or 19 years old before I had even had any ideas of pursuing this topic in college. I began to read everything I could find on the issue of skin color, which unfortunately there wasn't very much.
Right.
So I carried this interest with me into college. By the time I graduated from my master's program, I got a job at a mental health clinic in the city of Detroit. And I would see individuals in individual and group psychotherapy. Detroit is a predominantly African-American city, so most of the clients that I saw were African-Americans. And this issue of skin color would always present itself or insert itself into our conversations. When I might have been speaking about something else, the clients will always eventually find some way to get back to what ailed them psychologically, which was skin color. And that experience brought all of my memories from an earlier adolescence and childhood rushing back. And at that point, I realized that the only way that I could pursue this issue and satisfy some of my own curiosity, as well as maybe contribute something to the African American community, was to make this a part of my life's work and research. And I can only do that by writing a dissertation, which motivated me to engage in doctoral work. And so I have heard stories about hitting a wall and getting writer's block and being absorbed so much in a particular issue that you get completely exhausted. That was 20 years ago when I started studying skin color, and I haven't lost interest at all. And that even to this day amazes me as to why I haven't. But it's something that I learn about on a daily basis, and I like nothing more than conducting the research that hopefully can impart or reveal some information to people that might be of value.
That is interesting. Now, how does the African American community react to your research?
I've had both positive and negative experiences. Skin color is not something that a lot of people are comfortable with talking about. The Color Complex was first published in 1992, and obviously it's a little over 20 years ago. And at that time, it was an issue that I think all of us were aware of, but it was something that wasn't amenable to public discourse.
Right.
Because I think all of us can relate to this issue by way of some family member. Many of us have lighter-skinned family members, and if you're old enough to go back to the 40s, maybe up into the 50s, those individuals might have engaged in passing where they disassociated themselves from their family members in order to live a better life and have more opportunities. I dare say that happens much today, but that certainly was a reality, and that's a very, very painful experience.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to bring it out into the open and put it into public discourse, I think not only conjures up painful memories for some people, at least older people, but it also, I think, has a backhanded way of trivializing white racism, and that's not the intent at all. The only way that you can gain a handle on something mentally is to confront it, resolve it, and move on. But to allow this issue to lay dormant while it's existing and not talking about it and addressing it, it just will be carried on not only in this generation but into the next generations to come.
You're right. I totally agree with that. Now, what about in academia? What is the reaction that you receive there about research being conducted on racism and skin color, especially by a person of color? Like, how do they react to that?
Well, academia is a culture, and there are certain rules and regulations, unwritten, but no less potent. And when I write about this issue and I talk about this issue before Euro-American or mainstream audiences, they have two reactions. Number one, it's not significant simply because it involves people of color.
Exactly.
Or it's not valid because it's not something that they can grasp. It's not something that comes into the frame of their interest. Now, I'm a social worker at my university. That's the department I work in. And I publish in the scholarly journals. I can specifically relate to social work journals because that's where most of my literature appears. And I found it very odd. There are two journals specifically geared to address issues pertaining to women. One is called Arete, and the other is called Ophelia. Mm-hmm. And they are well-respected journals. They've been around, I guess, maybe 30, 40 years. I can't say exactly. But according to the database searches that I've done, not one article has been published by either one of those journals involving skin color. And I know that skin color among women of color, particularly as pertains to African-American women, has resulted not only in suicides, in stillbirths, but otherwise mental dysfunction.
That's
now, right. I also teach human behavior classes here at my university, and I use a textbook called Human Behavior in a Social Environment, which is kind of the textbooks that most social work institutions around the country utilize. And I know most of the people in the field, and so I know the authors of the textbook. And at a social work conference, the Council on Social Work Education, which takes place once a year, I encountered the authors at one of the conferences getting on the elevator. So we exchanged pleasantries, and I questioned one of the authors named Dr. Karen Kirst Ashman, who is at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, about why the issue of skin color was not included in their well-written textbook. And the textbook is maybe 300 or 400 pages long. And she didn't seem to be quite happy that I would bring that up, that I would question her about that. As a matter of fact, she appeared to be a little offended. And her response to me was that she dismissed it, that she can't include everything. And I didn't understand, because if this was an issue that was significant enough to women of color, at least, where that it was life-threatening, that, if anything else, should make it a primary issue. But I guess she didn't seem to think so. And my perspective is that if this had involved Euro-American women, it definitely would have been front and center in the textbook.
You're
front
right.
and center. But unfortunately, that's Eurocentrism. And so academia is rooted in Eurocentrism. It has to be validated or found to be significant or relative to the Euro-American community for it to be considered mainstream.
That's
right. Unfortunate. Yes.
You know, it is. It's sad and it's very unfortunate. And I can remember last year when I was talking to a gentleman at another college about, articles on colorism in various journals. And at that time, he told me that it's extremely difficult to get articles dealing with skin color issues and especially colorism published.
Yes.
And I was so annoyed and outraged, and I said, wow, I'm finishing up a couple of my articles, and it really discouraged me. And then I said, wait a minute. And then I, did another thorough search, and there was not one journal out there that dealt with colorism.
Yes.
That's why I decided. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to start the Journal of Colorism Studies because, this is something that needs to get out there. And and I will tell you, Dr. Hall, I didn't get a real great fan base in the beginning when I would send out notices, and even to researchers of color, and I would send a notice, well, we're starting this Journal of Colorism Studies. Would you like to be a part of it, putting it together? And the reaction was just like, oh, how dare you?
Yes.
And my reaction to them was, no, how dare you not even think about us, having a journal. This skin color issues and colorism, it's this. First of all, colorism is detrimental.
Yes.
Number two, how can you sit here and say to me that it's justifiable for someone to continuously submit articles to journals and have them kicked back? And this gentleman told me he'd submitted to about maybe 12 or 13 journals. And the last one who decided to publish his work made him water it down.
Yes.
And I said, well, you know what? To me, that's a problem, because if you're going to talk about colorism, then let's talk about it. You can't sugarcoat it.
Right.
And we have to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say I've been at this for a while, so getting started it was extremely difficult, as you've indicated. But I think because there has been a growing number of court cases, which means that it's out in the open now, and people can no longer deny its existence.
Right.
That it's more likely to be acceptable now. My case. The case I testified for occurred in 1990. So since then, I review the literature on a daily basis. Since then, there have been literally hundreds of cases filed on the basis of skin color discrimination. And I might add, I always knew that it was an issue much, much larger than African Americans. But since my first book involved African Americans, I talked about that population. But I knew that it involved all people of color.
That's right.
And I have written about it since then, and I've collected data regarding the issue since then. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that the issue is probably more significant among some other people of color than it is among African Americans. But when it gets addressed in the public forum, it's usually pertaining to African Americans.
That's right.
But with African Americans, it's a taboo issue, and with other groups, Asians, Native Americans, Latinos, it's a taboo subject as well.
Right, it is. Indeed, it is. I believe that, for example, with your work and the research that you're doing, and the fact that you're an expert witness in the court cases, that is really outstanding because, number one, I think prior to you even testifying in that, and for that particular case, the justices were kind of confused as to actually how do we handle colorism cases, and there were some instances where years ago, some of them actually said there's no such thing as people belonging to the same racial group discriminating against each other based on skin tone. And I'm saying, no, that's wrong. And I believe it was just because of the fact that they just really did not want to accept the fact that this form of, that colorism really did exist. And I often question, was it a denial because of the fact that they knew the origins of colorism? Or was it just, their belief that there's just no such thing as colorism?
Well, I think another aspect of Eurocentrism is given to the fact that the academic community must be dictated or dominated by a Eurocentric element.
That's right.
And there are not many Euro-American scholars that I know of who have published or researched this area. So if you really want to talk to people, most of the people who have done extensive work on this area, most of us across the country are people of color.
That's right.
And we have that expertise that can't be effectively challenged by the ivory tower, so to speak. And so for that reason, I do see more Euro-American scholars studying this issue. I've read a few papers. There's a professor at Harvard who's been writing about this issue, and I read her work and I respect it. But she has not been publishing in this area for maybe 4 or 5 years, and so it's still relatively new to her. And also, I think people of color have a different kind of relationship with this kind of research than a member of the out group would have. So we might have some advantages intellectually where the issue of skin color is concerned.
I agree with you 100% on that. I do, because I also noticed that and this is another issue I wanted to ask you about, some of the scholars who've actually completed, let's say, their dissertations in which they focused on colorism, they finished and they're working in fields that have absolutely nothing to do with their studies, but and just trying to talk to them about, their research that they did do, they're reluctant to do so. It's like they want to put it in the back burner and walk away and not look back at it. And why do you think that exists?
Well, as I indicated before, it's, academia is a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I work for a school of social work, and social work serves oppressed and disadvantaged populations.
Right.
And I also know from the statistical data that about 80%, 85% of social workers, professional social workers, are Euro-Americans, and maybe 85, 90% are women. And what that means is the issues that get mainstream, the issues that gain significance, are issues which pertain to the interests of Euro-Americans and particularly Euro-American women. So social work as a field is pretty much dominated by children, interest in children, interest in women's issues, and interest in the wealth and in the elderly, because that's what that demographic is interested in and prefers. And to make my point, Dr. Ronald, who's a social work professor at Columbia University, wrote a book in 2006 called "The Black Males Left Behind," and essentially, particularly young Black and Latino males get the fewest resources and the fewest attention from the social work profession of any other demographic. And that's simply a reflection of those who dominate the field. And so white women, white males would be more likely to be interested in issues that pertain to them either directly or indirectly versus the issue of skin color. And that's not an intentional conspiracy. That's just a matter of fact. So it's up to us who have an interest to carry the banner. And at some point, with the continuing court cases evolving, it's going to be an issue that is going to force its way into mainstream academia. And I think we're just about at that point currently.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I can tell you when, with the college that I'm with now, as a faculty lecturer, there was a time when they offered us the opportunity, to present our research and what we were working on. And I remember when I gave my presentation on colorism, it was just as everybody was just in shock. Like, well, you're researching this? And yes, I am. And all that really did, Dr. Hall, it made me more determined to continue pursuing it because I am so passionate about this subject matter. And it has to be talked about and it has to be researched. But it was just the reaction. Now, there are not many people of color working there. But for me to hear that response, and then I went back to when I completed my dissertation, my mentor literally said to me, you don't want to conduct your research in that field. Uh-huh. And I'm like, well, why not? And her response to me was, Donna, listen to me. It's a bad move. It's too controversial. You'll hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you know what then? And I'm always, I'll challenge you in a heartbeat. And I said, well, I'm going to continue my research. I'm going to focus in on colorism in the workplace. And if you're telling me that I can't do that, because her first reaction was that I won't allow it. And we went back and forth, and my response in the end was, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go to the president of the college and we'll have a conversation because this is my degree. Yes. This is the area I'm passionate about. Yes. And how can you tell me I can't conduct research in it because it's too controversial?
Yes. Well,
and it was just sad that, and this was a black woman who actually said this.
Uh-huh.
And
indeed it is controversial, but I don't think anything. As a matter of fact, if it's controversial, that's more reason to want to study it and research it because there are obviously issues and questions that need to be resolved.
You're right, and it's the same response I basically received when I started the Interracial Colorism Project. It's like, why are you doing this? You just can't. Yes, and my response to people is that, do you understand that colorism is a serious issue, that we cannot let it just sit here and ignore it. We have to talk about it. We have to conduct the research, and we have to get the research out there to the world. And if we continue, if people of color don't take an interest in something that's affecting us, then, and we're researching all of these other areas, we need to stop and think, what is that saying about our thought processes and how we see our own people, and that's affecting us in a significant manner. And I refuse to stop it. Like I told someone the other day, I will be conducting research in colorism and keeping the project going until the day I leave this earth, because this is it's like my first love and my passion.
Good.
And but let me ask you this: what about? Let's talk about the bleaching syndrome. How does that differ from skin bleaching?
Well, I talk about the bleaching syndrome as a theoretical construct that I devised maybe 15, 20 years ago, and I wanted to find some way of simplifying some of the discriminatory behaviors that I saw among people of color. And as I began to travel throughout the world studying this issue and collecting data, places Asia, India, I saw the same behaviors recapitulated. And when I put it in the context of colonialism, I realized that under the influences of a Eurocentric ideal, that in fact not just African Americans but people of color were trying to refashion themselves in order to better assimilate into a Eurocentric environment and ultimately live a better quality of life. Now, the bleaching, skin bleaching, refers specifically to the application of a substance to one's skin in order to compromise the melanin in the skin, and that's what gives us so-called skin color.
Right.
But the bleaching syndrome I use as a metaphor, and bleaching syndrome means to disdain anything from one's person that is presumed to be a source of denigration. So you not only want to bleach your skin if your skin color is denigrating, but if your language pattern is denigrating, you want to alter your language pattern. So, for example, someone who is from the South, maybe Mississippi, has a thick Southern drawl. That has a negative stereotype. It doesn't have anything to do with a person's intelligence, but it is a negative stereotype. So that person, when they manifest the bleaching syndrome, they will try to speak with a New England accent. Persons who are Native American, they are identified typically by their long hair. So they cut their hair to affect a Western style. That is a bleaching syndrome among Native Americans. Even persons who are Euro-American, they are not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. If they have a last name that identifies them as Jewish, for example, Brownstein, then they may alter their surname to Brown versus Brownstein. So skin bleaching refers specifically to bleaching one's skin, but the bleaching syndrome refers to a whole host of measures and behaviors that people engage in order to modify themselves in a way that they might feel is more appealing or more acceptable. And some of the instances that I become aware of involving a bleaching syndrome are extremely painful to talk about, especially as pertains to African women or African American women, because I don't know that people really know the extent of this issue outside of the U.S. unless you happen to visit these places and you can see it firsthand. It's very devastating.
That's terrible. Is it to the point where does it really cause them like psychological issues though? When they're caught up into this bleaching syndrome, does it really, really affect them like psychologically to the point that they maybe may need counseling or help?
Oh, no doubt about that, because when you're talking about a person engaging in a behavior that has risk to their physical well-being and indeed their life, that's about as dysfunctional as is possible. And so the bleaching syndrome has three components: the perceptual component, the psychological component, and the behavioral component. Now, the perceptual obviously is what you think of yourself and your skin colors pertains to the world at large. And then the psychological is how you process that. Do you link yourself with something derogatory or do you link yourself with something ideal? And based on the outcome of those two processes, then you may have your behavior impacted. So individuals who perceive their skin color being dark as something derogatory then will engage in behaviors to modify their skin color. Now, in visiting some poorer countries, women cannot afford store-bought bleaching creams. And so what they do in Africa, for example, some of the African countries like Tanzania, they will get toothpaste and they will mix it with arsenic or they will mix it with mercury. And then they will apply that to their facial area and their extremities, which will lighten the skin. But when these women get pregnant, that toxic substance enters the fetus by way of the placenta and results in a stillbirth. And so if a person is willing to engage in those kinds of behaviors despite the risk involved, then that is a person that is in critical need of psychological counseling. But again, this is not, as far as mainstream academia is concerned, this is not an important issue.
No, this is a very serious issue that, I mean, I don't maybe, and we know why that it's not important to them, but this is so serious until this is something that needs to be brought to the forefront, and people need to really hear about it and understand it, because if it's to the point that they're using these homemade, I guess you can call them applications in order to bleach their skin, and they don't understand the harmful effects of it, and then now we have the stillbirth. I'm thinking about the fact that what happens 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now with the substance or the chemicals in their bodies.
Yes.
And that's, that to me, that's an issue that definitely needs to be addressed. And my other concern is when they're actually like putting together or making these applications, what do you think is going through their minds as to why they actually want to have that skin light? Like, what is it?
Well, unfortunately, this is an issue I think that's more critical to women of color than it is for men of color, although it's not irrelevant to men of color. Women in this culture, unfortunately, are still valued for the physical attributes.
Right.
And so a darker complected woman of color who bleaches her skin sees herself as being more marketable in terms of marriage potential. In Jamaica, I had been addressing this issue in a Jamaican context for a while because I have feared all along that this was going to visit American shores.
Right.
It left Africa. In Jamaica right now, they have a phenomenon that they refer to as vampires. And a vampire is typically a young Jamaican woman who has applied so much bleaching cream to her skin, and her skin is so damaged that she cannot come out during the daylight hours when the sun is out because it's too painful. So they can only come out at night, and they're referred to as vampires for that reason. Now, we don't see the bleaching syndrome as obvious here in the U.S.
Right.
Bleaching creams are sold, but they're referred to as creams that will even the tone out, that will cure or modify blotches in the skin, but in fact they actually contain some of these bleaching chemicals. And I also see a lot of particularly young women and female entertainers starting to bleach their hair now.
Yes.
And that's where it's starting. You have black women who are bleaching their hair platinum blonde.
Yeah, that's true.
They probably bleach their skin as well, but that may not be as obvious. So it's something that I've been talking about 15, 20 years, and it's not getting that much attention, so it's beginning to negatively affect the African-American population, and it's really so unnecessary.
But let me ask you this. When they're bleaching their hair blonde, is that like an absolute no-no in black America?
Well, I've always said it's not just bleaching the hair and the skin, it's also the color eye contacts. It's not bleaching the skin or the hair or the color contacts. It's the reason you do it.
Right.
Euro-Americans bleach their hair and wear color contacts, but they do it for different reasons. They may prefer a different eye color or a different hair color. People of color are bleaching themselves in order to enjoy a better quality of life and to be comfortable with themselves. And that's more dysfunctional.
Right. That's sad. Wow. Interesting. Well, let me ask you, when we do talk about the bleaching syndrome, does that occur consciously or unconsciously?
It occurs in both instances. Some people are very aware that they do not like their skin color, and they don't have any problems admitting that publicly. I think most of us probably would be too embarrassed to admit something about ourselves that intimate. I think the African American community, we all know this exists, but it's been such a taboo subject, so we've sort of buried the fact that this issue has existed, and it didn't start. It didn't start recently. This goes back probably to the antebellum period, but again, it's such a taboo subject that we have, until just recently, we've only been willing to address it in a public forum. It's always kind of been regarded as our dirty little secret.
That's right.
And because racism, white racism, seems to be so much more insidious, we're willing to sort of tolerate our own issues with discrimination because it's more significant and more important to talk about discrimination across races versus intra-race.
You know what? Something else I wanted to bring up with the bleaching creams is that what I have noticed also when you made mention of a lot of movie stars and people in Hollywood, I've noticed over the past couple of weeks at least 3 to 4 people whose skin tone I know for a fact was much darker, and all of a sudden when they're on the shows, these people's skins, they're so light now until you can barely recognize them.
Yes.
And I thought it was sad. And then I took a trip to a beauty supply store in an inner city area. And here was what I noticed, Dr. Hall. There was practically half of a row, a very long row, full of all kinds of bleaching creams for the.
Yes.
And I'm standing there and I'm looking at it, and the guy walked up and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "No." I said, and I was writing down the names of them. And he said, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "Oh, because I'm doing a study and I just wanted to be able to thoroughly document, the names." And I asked him if I could take a picture with my cell phone, to save the products. And when I was doing it, 2 young women walked in, and one girl, you could see where she bleached her skin because you could see the blotches from where it didn't take evenly. And she picked up, I think it was a tube of black and white ointment. I think that's what it was called. Some skin. And I asked her, "Can I ask you a question about that?" And she said, "Oh, it's great. It works. It is great. Look at my face." And I said, "You're putting that on your face." I said, "Do you realize the danger and the harm that, you don't know what's going to happen to you 5-10 years down the road?" Dr. Hall, within 2 seconds, this woman used all kinds of profanity, the words I've even heard. And they just told me where to go and said to me, "Why do you care?" And my response was that because you don't know what's going to happen to you, and the mere fact that you're so interested in continuing this process of bleaching your skin, that says to me that there's a concern here, an issue as to why you feel it necessary to do that. And her response, Dr. Hall, was that if I'm lighter and I have this long hair, I'll definitely be in the top 10.
That's unfortunate, but...
And it was unbelievable. And I looked at my friend. I said, "Did you hear that?" Because I needed a witness so I can have a witness and heard. And here's the thing, Dr. Hall. To her, it was just like you and I talking about, colorism. It was no big thing. It was normal. It was a routine.
Right.
And it's sad.
Yes, it's something. It's sort of been a hobby of mine when I travel to stop by the local drugstores or pharmacies and pick up a tube of bleaching cream in the particular country that I'm visiting. And I go to the Philippines a lot, and they simply have rows and rows of various brands of bleaching creams. But I spent the month of October working on skin color in India, and I was in Mumbai, and I visited a pharmacy, and I picked up a tube of bleaching cream. It was called Fair and Lovely. Okay. Now, I've seen Fair and Lovely in other countries, but this particular bleaching cream, Fair and Lovely, was for men.
Wow.
It was for Indian men. So men in some countries are bleaching their skin in order to appear more attractive. So that's turned a new corner. In the U.S., Western countries, males always have the opportunity to earn, so they can be dark-complected and they can engage in compensatory behaviors in order to become an ideal. But women typically are still valued for physical attributes, so they may not have as many options. So they're more likely to engage in bleaching. But at least in India, your skin color can also represent your caste.
That's true.
So
That's right.
if you're a lighter skin, a lighter complected Indian Asian, that indicates that you may be a Brahmin or someone of a higher caste and a professional middle class person.
Wow. Is there any interest in these countries for them to actually, change this colorism belief and treat people equally? Is there an interest anywhere?
Oh, getting back to India, most definitely there's a lot of political activism taking part by various women's organizations. I don't know of any males organizations, but certainly there's a movement amongst Indian women, and in some African countries, there's been legislation imposed whereby it is now illegal to sell bleaching creams because people understand the implications. But it's not been enough to generate interest from those companies, those industries that make these products and unfortunately profit from them. I mean, if you're talking about making money,
right.
People will go to the black market as long as a profit can be made. So there is an effort, but how successful that effort is, I'm not in a position to say.
That's interesting. Because you're right. Even if, like you said, if they say you can't buy it, it's illegal, that black market is going to kick in.
Yes.
And unless they pass, severe, really harsh laws, banning these products from the country, fully, it's going to continue. But how do the darker complexion women who are using these creams, how do you think they actually, do you think they're aware that they're dangerous, or are they aware and they just don't care?
Well, I think on some level they have to be aware. I mean, there's information available to address the dangerous aspects of these bleaching creams, but I think the threat of danger is secondary to feelings of self-esteem. I mean, people have to be comfortable with themselves. And again, if you're a woman and you want to increase your marriageability, and you know that you can do this by using bleaching creams to lighten your skin, then, the dangers, the risks, which are not typically immediate, they seem secondary. If you applied bleaching creams and you immediately, suffered critical consequences, even death, then maybe women might be less likely to use them. But usually the pathogenic effects occur over time. So it may take several months, several years before a woman actually can experience damage or some life-threatening consequence as a result of using bleaching creams. So they don't seem as urgent, as critical.
Oh, okay. I can tell you, we were starting a taco magazine, and the taco stands for Talking About Colorism Out in the Open. And it was going to be an online magazine that really focuses on colorism, but my goal was to make it a global magazine.
Uh-huh.
And one of the second conversation I had with people who were getting involved was that there'll be absolutely no advertisements allowed in this magazine for any of these skin bleaching products, absolutely none. And one of the guys responded, and he said, well, Dr. C, if we do that, then I don't think that's a good idea. And I just sat there and I looked at him, and Dr. Hall, after about 5 minutes, I just had to excuse him from the project and say, because I couldn't even react to him. That's how annoyed I was with his comment. And because my focus is that if this is a global magazine, colorism is a global issue. We know that the skin bleaching products, which are dangerous, we don't want to seem like we're backing them or we're supporting this or we're encouraging it. And by allowing them to put an ad in your magazine, whether it's an online magazine or a hard copy, it's the same message. You're saying you support it.
Yes.
I mean, that was an issue, unbelievable. But what I wanted to do is go back to talking about the bleaching. When women of color begin to value light skin, and they do so at the expense of dark skin, how does this affect her overall outlook on dark-skinned people and her relationships with dark-skinned people?
Well, I think it's a process that unfortunately, will be visited upon younger generations. The Kenneth B. Clark doll studies that you mentioned a little earlier.
Right.
That was done using young ladies who were not even old enough to articulate racial issues. Kids can have racial concepts that they can't address verbally, but emotionally, psychologically, they understand that it makes a difference as early as the age of 3.
Right.
So starting that young, it becomes an issue that grows over time and becomes very, very, very difficult to reverse by the time they reach puberty. If we don't get at darker complected persons and probably lighter complected persons, I should also mention that 99% of what we talk about, the skin color issue, is really the denigration of dark-skinned persons. But light-skinned persons have some difficulty as well. They have different issues. They have skin color issues, but they're different. But in both instances, there's trauma involved. So I don't want people to get the impression that if you're lighter complected, then life is bliss. That's not the case. It's just that the dynamic of skin color involving lighter skinned African Americans or people of color can be traumatic, just as traumatic, but only for different reasons. So I think that African Americans, other people of color in general, we need to begin to idealize the whole spectrum of skin colors. When we see women pictured as beautiful, a dark-skinned woman needs to be represented in that scene as well.
That's right.
Everyone can't be blonde hair, blue eyes, long flowing hair, etc. We need to have people with pronounced African features so that those young African American girls who look traditionally African can see themselves and can see themselves idealized. Because if they grow up with this image, this alien image of what is ideal, and the only way that they can accommodate that ideal is to bleach themselves, then they're really heading and taking a part in their own dysfunction.
That's right. I agree with you. I know what I started doing a couple of months ago was actually monitoring television commercials, and I was looking to see black women of darker complexions and Afrocentric features in commercials. And this is what I noticed, Dr. Hall. When it came to cleaning products, you could see a browner-skinned woman.
Yes.
And it disturbed me. But then I started looking, and I said, when I watched the Dove soap commercial, and I'm saying, well, they keep having these commercials and how great Dove is. Why don't I see a woman of color with, black woman, a browner skin or dark complexion with Afrocentric features on these commercials for your products?
Yes.
And what I did, I compared it to when I would go into BJ's to go shopping, and each month, and I would just, you hate to look in other people's carts, but I wanted to see if I saw any women of color actually buying Dove, and I did, and it disturbed me.
Uh-huh.
So, I'll write my little letters and my little campaign to get on people about issues, and in my letter I said I would just like to see a black woman on one of your commercials of a darker complexion and Afrocentric features. When you have the commercials on, this is how great it works on the skin.
Yes.
Because if as the consumers, if we're purchasing these products, we're bringing them into our homes and we're using them, but you're not putting us on your commercials, then I have a problem with that.
Yes, I agree totally.
And that seems to be an issue.
Yes. And unfortunately, we can criticize mainstream America as being an accessory to some of these behaviors, but unfortunately, there's a significant element in the African American community who similarly denigrate
That's true.
Dark skin and idealize light skin.
They do, and I can just tell you off of I'm not a Twitter person. I'll have my items like I post to automatically get plugged into to Twitter. And when I went there a couple times to see because sometimes it'll overcopy things, and some of the nonsense there with black people where the lighter skin, they have this pound team light skin and pound team dark skin, and to them it's like one big joke. They don't get it.
Yes.
it's such a degree until it's actually. I mean, it really disgusts you to read some of the comments that are written there.
Oh.
It really does. So I said, you know what, I can't go on there. I have someone who'll go on there and take care of Twitter for me now. And what's so sad about it is that these are young people.
Yes.
They're young people, and they're making the comments, and, well, I'm light-skinned, so I'm all that. And then you hear the guy saying, well, I only want a light-skinned girl with long hair. And I'm actually saying, you know what, it's as if somebody had told me that this was actually happening, I don't think I would believe them.
Yes.
But the sad part of it is that it's real. It's happening every day, and it doesn't seem that it's decreasing. It seems like it's increasing.
Yes. Well, I think with more interracial marriages and biracial births, we won't be able to discern a person's racial identity just by looking at them. In fact, there'll be a composite of races. So you'll have a person with Asian features and African hair texture, but unfortunately, one way that they'll be able to consistently differentiate those people will be by their skin color. And it won't be black and white, it'll be dark and light.
Mm-hmm.
The same kinds of discriminatory behaviors and attitudes will exist only in a slightly or less racial context, but existent nonetheless.
Yeah, you're right, and it's unfortunate. Well, I recently expanded the Interracial Colorism Project to include Asian, Indian, and Latino communities, and have researchers from those backgrounds who will actually be working with the project. Now, what are your thoughts on colorism occurring within those specific communities?
Well, as I indicated, when I first started this work years ago, I had always known that it was something that impacted all people of color, because all people of color, to some extent, have either been enslaved, colonized, or otherwise dominated by a Eurocentric faction. And when I started studying this issue amongst Latinos, I was a bit surprised, because on the surface it appears that race and skin color is totally irrelevant to Latino populations. And when I visit Puerto Rico, I go to San Juan and I go to Ponce quite often. And in fact, it does appear from the outside looking in that race is no longer an issue there. But that's only from the perspective of an outsider. And in fact, if you know anything about the intimacies of Latino culture, particularly speaking about Puerto Rican, you know that the issue of skin color is very relevant. You have pretty much 3 or 4 different colloquial terms in the African American community for skin color. We typically will say someone is light skin or medium skin or dark skin or brown skin or yellow skin, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
At the same time, Latinos will tell you that they are very racially tolerant. They have over 100 terms, Spanish terms, to refer to one's racial heritage and or skin color, including negrito, moreno, blanco, mestizo, indios, and it can go on and on. All these define your variation of blood. And from my perspective, if skin color were really insignificant, then there would not be so many terms to finely detail and differentiate one's ethnic or racial heritage. So in fact, it may not be something that Latinos are willing to acknowledge publicly. And I've done studies, and there are others who have done studies that establish the fact that there is a correlation between skin color and various other elements of quality of life, income, education, occupation, etc. And if you look at a lot of your Latino countries around the world, take Cuba, for example. Cuba is a country that has a significant African descendant dark-skinned population.
Right.
But if you look at the power structure and the upper classes, they get fairer skinned and closer to Caucasian than than most other groups. And in fact, Dr. Carlos Moore, who was a very dark-skinned Cuban was exiled from Cuba years ago because he made this point public. And I know from some of the literature I've covered on Latinos that dark-skinned Cuban Americans cannot get housing in Cuban American neighborhoods that are dominated by lighter-skinned Cuban Americans.
Wow, it's terrible.
And so to say that doesn't exist elsewhere is just not true. And if you talk about Asia, Japan had a value for very light skin even prior to being visited by Europeans. And once Europeans began to interact with Japanese, then the issue, the value for light skin was exacerbated. So you don't hear this talked about very much, but skin color is very critical in most of your Asian countries, with some exception, but most of your Asian countries, skin color is very important, maybe even more important than it is in the African American community.
Wow, that is something. And we think it here. Do you think that colorism is a bigger issue here or over there?
I'm really hesitant without the kind of data that I would like to have access to, and most of the data that I've collected around the world is what's called non-representative samples.
Right.
So what I determine from those surveys that I collect, in fact, I really can't generalize to the entire population. It just gives me a snapshot.
Right.
But if I would have an opinion, I would probably say that the issue is equally significant around the world. It's just maybe manifested differently among the various groups and among the various nationalities and cultures.
Oh, okay. That is a good point. It's interesting. Well, with regard to your current research now, are you working on any new projects or have any upcoming lectures or information that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I'm scheduled to visit Puerto Rico next week, matter of fact, the end of February, actually. And I'm going to the University of Puerto Rico, Calle, which is a unit of the university system located in a kind of a mountainous area between San Juan and Ponce. And there I'm going to be lecturing on skin color, and I'm also going to be collecting surveys. And in April, I'm scheduled to go back to India, back to Mumbai, and I'm going to be located at a university called the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is kind of one of their premier social science institution there. And I'm going to be lecturing and collecting skin color data there as well. And I'm always working on a book. I'm always writing a book, and I'm writing a couple of journal articles. Today I met with two of my doctoral students who are working with me on this skin color project, and we're doing something called a structural equation model on skin color and income. And what I've been able to determine, just this preliminary overview of the data that we've collected, we know that there's a correlation between skin color and income, but with this latest analysis that we've done, we think it appears that the relationship between skin color and income is influenced by the fact that lighter-skinned persons get more support and have higher self-esteem. And if that is true, if that proves to be true, then that's something that I've not seen before.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting.
And lastly, the book I'm working on has to do with skin color in a worldwide context. So I'm going to probably a good year and a half before I can get the draft of that completed. But I'm always working on something regarding skin color. That's what I do.
That's your passion.
That's what I do. Yes, ma'am.
I think that's great and excellent. And I wanted to thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
I enjoyed it.
And I definitely look forward to working with you and definitely having you come back on the show and talk about your experience, especially when you go to Mumbai. I think that's how long are you going to stay there?
This next trip, I don't expect to be there no more than maybe 10 days.
Okay. Well, we definitely have to talk to you more about that and see how the colorism issues are there.
Okay.
I think this has been, I just can't thank you enough. It's just been a outstanding conversation. And once again, our listeners, this is Dr. Ronald Hall. And if you're looking for information on Dr. Hall, you can find it at the Color Clinic. And Dr. Hall, how may people contact you?
I'm just at Michigan State University. My email is hallr@msu.edu.
Okay, great. Dr. Hall, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Okay, everyone. What I wanted to wrap up the show with tonight, that was a wonderful interview with Dr. Ronald E. Hall. And remember also, he's one of the co-authors of The Color Complex, which I noted earlier in the show. If you're interested, you can also find his books on Amazon.com. And you can also go to the website for the Colorism Project under Talk Radio. And there's a link there which will take you directly over to Dr. Hall's Color Clinic and the Color Clinic Library and to both of his books. And if there are any listeners out there, if you have any questions, you can feel free to give me a call, call into the show if you'd like to ask a question. And while I have the lines open, what I also would like to remind you is that this Saturday, which is February 9th, I will be hosting Out in the Open, which is a community, well, actually it's a presentation and a community discussion on colorism within the black community. And I look forward to you coming out. We will actually have a presentation first, and then we'll open up and have a dialogue. And we'll discuss, like, your colorism issues, concerns, any experiences that you may have had, comments. And we're also going to talk about the group I mentioned earlier with Dr. Hall, the TACO group, which stands for Talking About Colorism Out in the Open. And I will tell you this, if we have just 10 people there, the show will go on regardless of the number of people that attend, and I'm looking forward to it. And if you don't have any questions at all, if the guest call-in line, and let me give that to you, it would help. It's 914-338-1308. I'll give it a few minutes in case you'd like to call in and ask a question or comment. And also to give you an update, the Interracial Colorism Project has now expanded, and we are also covering the Asian, Indian, and Latino communities. And we'll have the show format will actually change, and I'll post a notice about that where each Thursday, there'll be a show hosted on one of the different racial groups. For example, one week may be colorism and black Americans. The next week would be with Asian Americans. The following week, Indian, and so on with Latino. And we'll follow that format. I'm excited about the expansion of the project to include all people of color who are definitely affected by colorism. And with that, everyone, I don't have anything else for the show. We've had a wonderful interview tonight. I look forward to everybody tuning in next week and talking about our colorism issues. Once again, everyone, thank you for tuning in, and have a good evening. Good night. Thank you for tuning in to the Dynamics of Colorism with your host, Dr. Donnamaria Culbreth. You may contact Dr. Culbreth at 1-800-905-2136. You may email your questions to drculbreth@colorismproject.com. We're looking forward to you tuning in next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, remember, dare to be different and dream in color. This is Dr. Culbreth signing off for the Dynamics of Colorism. Good night, everyone.